Imagine this: the most powerful empire in the world, stretching across continents, ruling over hundreds of millions of people, built not just on guns, not just on ships, but on drugs, not cocaine, not heroin, but opium. A sticky brown sap scraped from the pods of a flower. It sounds impossible, right? But this one drug didn't just make millions of people addicted, it paid for wars, built fortunes, and even handed Britain one of the most valuable pieces of real estate in the world: Hong Kong. This is the untold story of how the British Empire rose on the back of narcotics and how China fell into one of the darkest centuries in its history. To understand how this all began, we need to leave London and head to India. In the fertile plains of Bengal, farmers were forced to grow a crop they didn't even want: poppies. The East India Company, that strange half corporation, half government machine, dictated what millions of peasants could plant. Food crops? No. You had to grow poppies. Each season, farmers slit the green pods with tiny knives. Overnight, a sticky white sap oozed out and hardened into brown resin. This was opium. They scraped it off, pressed it into uniform balls, and packed it into wooden chests, each chest weighing about 140 pounds. Tens of thousands of these chests left India every year. But here's the thing: the Chinese emperor had banned opium. It was illegal, which meant what the British were doing wasn't just trade, it was state sponsored drug smuggling. But why smuggle drugs into China at all? The answer: tea. By the late 1700s, Britain was hooked on Chinese tea. It wasn't just a drink, it was a national obsession. Afternoon tea, workers' tea breaks, the whole culture ran on it. But there was a problem. The Chinese didn't want British goods. They didn't want British cloth or British trinkets or British machinery. They wanted silver, only silver. And Britain's silver reserves were draining fast. So someone had a clever and sinister idea. Instead of silver, why not sell something the Chinese population would crave? Something addictive, something they couldn't stop buying even if their government outlawed it. That something was opium. Once the trade began, the results were staggering. Silver stopped flowing out of Britain. Instead, silver poured into British pockets. China, on the other hand, began to see its own silver vanish. Its economy trembled, and addiction began to spread like wildfire. By the 1830s, the opium trade was no longer just smuggling. It was an empire in itself. British merchants, along with powerful trading houses like Jardine Matheson, ran fleets of fast clipper ships. These weren't slow cargo haulers, they were sleek, deadly fast, built to outrun Chinese patrols and deliver their cargo to Canton. At night, smugglers unloaded crates on hidden docks. Secret networks carried opium deep into China, where dealers sold it by the pipe, the pellet, the hit. The scale? Unbelievable. In 1838 alone, nearly 40,000 chests of opium entered China. That's over 5 million kilograms, millions of doses. And the money was so good that it became essential. In fact, opium revenues made up nearly 1/5 of the colonial government's budget in India. The British Empire didn't just know about the drug trade, they depended on it to make money. And no one in London wanted to stop it. But in China, one man did. And he fought back in a way the British would never forget. His name was Lin Zexu, a brilliant scholar, incorruptible, a man with a reputation for moral clarity. When he saw his country collapsing under the weight of addiction, he didn't stay silent. In 1839, he wrote a letter addressed directly to Queen Victoria. In it, he asked a simple, devastating question: if opium is forbidden in England, why do you let it be sold abroad? Why do you bring harm to other nations? The letter, it never reached her. So Lin Zexu took action himself. That same year, in the city of Canton, he seized more than 20,000 chests of opium from British merchants. He destroyed it all, mixing the drug with salt and lime, dumping it into pits, and flushing it out to sea. It was a bold, dramatic gesture, but for Britain, it wasn't just about drugs anymore. It was about pride and money. The result: war. The first Opium War began in 1839, and from the very first, battle, the outcome was clear. The British Navy was the most advanced in the world. They had steam powered gunboats, cannons with incredible range, and disciplined troops. China's forces, wooden junks, outdated weapons, and armies that hadn't faced modern warfare. It was a slaughter. By 1842, China was forced to surrender. The Treaty of Nanking ended the war, and the terms were brutal. China had to pay millions in silver. They had to open up ports for trade. And worst of all, they had to hand over Hong Kong, a small rocky island that would soon become one of the world's greatest cities. But the humiliation didn't end there. Just 14 years later, in 1856, another dispute, the Arrow Incident, gave Britain an excuse to fight again. This time, France joined in. The Second Opium War was even more devastating. In 1860, British and French troops marched into Beijing. And what they did there still haunts Chinese memory. They looted the Summer Palace, a vast, glittering complex of art, gardens, and treasures collected over centuries. Priceless works were stolen, and when they were done looting, they set it all on fire. The flames burned for days, a jewel of Chinese civilization reduced to ash. Opium profits continued flowing, silver kept filling British vaults, and Hong Kong became the crown jewel of Asian trade, remaining a British colony for more than 150 years until 1997. For China, the consequences were catastrophic. Opium addiction devastated society. Millions were hooked, families collapsed, productivity fell, the economy bled silver, and politically, the dynasty's authority crumbled. The once mighty Qing Empire, which had stood for centuries, entered what the Chinese still call their century of humiliation. Foreign powers dictated terms, carved out spheres of influence, and treated China as a weak, broken giant. Here's the part history books often skip. The money from opium didn't just vanish into thin air, it built things. It funded railways in India, it built estates in Britain, it established trading houses that later became powerful banks and corporations. Even today, you can trace opium fortunes in museums, universities, and old money institutions across the world. In other words, parts of our modern world were literally built on addiction. And the story isn't over. The scars of the opium wars still shape global politics. Hong Kong's modern history, China's deep mistrust of the West, and the memory of humiliation, they all trace back to Britain's drug empire. The opium wars weren't just about trade, they were about greed, about how far empires will go to get what they want. And they're a reminder that behind every empire, behind every fortune, there's always a cost. Sometimes that cost is paid not in gold, but in human suffering. This was the Opium Wars, how drugs built an empire. If you want more stories like this, the kind of history that schools leave out, hit subscribe. Because history isn't boring, it's terrifying, shocking, and unforgettable.